If you've seen some of the videos I've posted this week about my trip to New York City, you might be wondering, why is she so obsessed with it? Well, I have a story for you, and it's about my relationship with New York City. So we're gonna go back in time, and I was about 22 years old or something like that. I was born and raised in Minnesota, for those of you who don't know. Typical suburban girl, right? I just grew up in the suburbs, would go to the city every weekend to go eat out or whatever, but I'm a suburban Minnesota girl. And when I was in my early 20s, cousins of mine had moved to New York City. I had never really given New York a thought. It was just a city out on the East Coast that was super big, and I had no desire to visit it. Well, my cousins moved out there, and they said, "Hey, Pauline, come and visit us because it could be pretty expensive to visit New York, and we'd love to have you take you around and show you New York City." And I was like, pass. I have no desire to go to New York. I was, again, a Minnesota suburban girl. And to me, at that time, I thought New York was a place where you would just walk out onto the street and get mugged, right? There was just crime everywhere, and it was big and dirty and scary. And I was like, I'm not coming. But another cousin of mine said, "Come on, Pauline, let's go." So I let my arm get twisted and I said, "Okay, let's go to New York." But I was terrified. And when I say terrified, I'm think again, Minnesota girl, small suburbs, don't really have exposure to a big city, and assuming I was just gonna get mugged. At that time, there was no smartphones, and so I literally, and I'm not kidding, this is literal, I put my driver's license in my sock and wore tennis shoes, and then I put like $40 in my other sock and wore tennis shoes, and I thought, at least I'll be prepared and be able to go home if something happens. I was that scared, let me just emphasize. Just had no desire to go. I was like, let's just go. I mean, maybe it'll be fun, but let's just get this out of the way, and I would like to come back home. So that sets the story for you. Get on the airplane, get into a cab, and driving over to my cousin's apartment, and can't really see. I mean, I'm not looking up at the sky or anything, just kind of looking out the window a little bit stressed out that I'm there, so I'm not really feeling anything. And I remember this moment clear as day. I stepped out of the cab, I open up the door, and I look up. And have you ever had something happen to you where you say something and you don't know where it comes from because it comes deep from within your soul? It's like you didn't say it, but it came from a completely different place. I looked up at the sky, I looked up at the buildings, and without me even knowing where it came from, why it came, I literally said, "I'm home." And I cannot describe to you in that moment what it felt like. I had lived in Minnesota my whole life. And in that moment when I looked up and I saw the buildings, it was this feeling of as if I had come home. I just knew it. I knew the land, I knew the city, I knew the air, I knew the dirt, I knew the energy, I knew everything about it, and I felt home. Minnesota was my home, but I never felt the kind of home there that I felt right there in that moment. And I remember when it came out of my mouth like that and I said, "I'm home," I even was like, whoa, why did I say that? I didn't know why I actually said that. But the feeling of groundedness and stability and comfort that I felt in that moment, I was a changed woman. Because for the rest of the week, if anyone has ever been to Manhattan, it is intimidating. If you have never been, I mean, there are people swarming everywhere, cars are honking, traffic everywhere, no one's following the pedestrian walk sign, they're just, walking right through. The subway system, the buses, there's so much chaos. And normally when people go to New York City, they are taken aback from it, especially if you're from the Midwest and you're like, "Oh my God, why are they honking the horns? How come people aren't stopping at the crosswalk?" All sorts of comments. A lot of things about New York City don't make sense to people who come and visit it. And when I was there, from the moment I felt at home, I don't even know how to describe it, but I just merged and slipped right into the New York life. It was like I had found my people. Without anyone telling me how to do this, I knew how to walk with the crowds. I knew how to like cross the light without having to wait for it to be green. I just instinctively knew everything about being a New Yorker, so to say. And it was coming from somewhere here because I'd never been there. And I even like, everything just made sense to me. The honking makes sense. The fact that everything, you know, is packed in together and this is how people do things, it just made sense. Everything about New York made sense to me. I couldn't describe it. Okay, so I became so obsessed that after that, I found any excuse that I could to go. Sign up for a conference, I'm flying out there. Oh, there's an award show, I'm going over there. Is it Christmas? Let's go again. I just kept going and kept going and kept going. And I made so many trips to New York because it was like this feeling I was addicted to, because every time I went, I just felt this home feeling. So then, pause in my life and I stopped going. My life went in a different direction and going to New York wasn't a possibility, wasn't a priority anymore, and that kind of went on hold. So I hadn't gone there in so long, and I just went again this last week. The desire had come up within me, and I was like, I really want to go to New York. I just need to go, and I'm longing to go home. I still felt like I had that home feeling. And I went there, I went with my friends, I had a blast. I felt that at home feeling again. It was so amazing. I'm gonna make a whole nother video about it, but I actually healed some illnesses that I had because of the energy I felt when I was back home. But that's not what this video is about. So I actually was like, why am I this obsessed with New York? There must be a past life connection. I have to have a past life connection, but I don't do a lot of past life work in my psychic work, and I hadn't really done anything, and I thought, I've got to find out. So I actually signed up for the Dolores Cannon style of past life regression with a woman here in St. Paul. And the day that we were doing the session, I went under the hypnosis, and we went through a couple of lifetimes, and I then was going into the third lifetime, and this one was clearer than the rest of them, okay? I looked around, and it didn't look at all like New York. Did not look like what you're seeing back there. It's just short little brown buildings, and I'm looking around while I'm in this regression, and I was like, it doesn't look like it, but I'm almost positive I'm in New York. I'm in New York. I think I'm in New York. And all of a sudden, all these details started coming through. I started describing to the lady who was doing the session with me, like, I am a white woman. I've got dark black hair. I've got a white dress on. There's like a big puff, you know, going behind the dress, like the little hoop dresses. I see brown buildings. It doesn't look anything at all like New York, but this is New York. And I'm so, so happy. And as we went more into the life, it turned out that I was just I was describing, and I can't even tell you, like, when I was in this session, the information was just coming out of me. I felt like that woman, and I was like, I love my life. I'm rich. I started describing this house. I lived in a 2-story home. We were well-to-do. I was an only child. My parents were off doing social things. I was beautiful, and boys loved me, and I was going to parties, and it was just a happy, happy, happy life. I came out of that knowing with all of my heart that that was true because of how it felt when the information was coming out. But of course, I'm always all about like, but is that true? Because I'm like the biggest skeptic, even though this is the work that I do. So maybe about a month later, I was getting a psychic reading from one of my go-to people. She does Akashic Records. And I hadn't told her about this experience with my hypnosis. And so I said, hey, at the end of the session, just wondering, are you able to tell me anything about my relationship with New York? And that was the only information that I gave her. Didn't tell her anything about anything. So she kind of closes her eyes because she's giving me a psychic reading. And she's like, well, I see that you were there around the 1880s. You had a life there. I see you're wearing like a white dress, and you've got like a hoop skirt on, like the 1880s style hoop skirt. You're really rich, you're really pretty, and you just party a lot, and you've got a big house. And my jaw dropped because I hadn't told her anything. And she literally described what came from me when I was under this hypnosis session to a T. Now she said 1880s, and she didn't describe the building. So I quickly, after the session, went up and looked up New York City in the 1880s, and you won't believe it. the buildings that I saw on Google were the buildings that I saw in the hypnosis session. And I had never looked up New York in the 1880s ever.